What's up, guys? Welcome to another episode of the Young Guns podcast. And today we'll be covering the Minnesota Wild versus the Vegas Golden Knights playoff matchup. As you know, obviously, these two teams are obviously coming up against each other this season. And, they faced each other before. Vegas obviously beat them when they obviously did face each other. But these are two very interesting franchises. Obviously, as you know, the Vegas Golden Knights finished the 82 game season with 110 points, 50 wins, 22 losses, 10 overtime losses, 275 goals for, 219 goals against, a differential of plus 56. They have a home record of 29 9-3 and an away record of 21 13-7. The Minnesota Wild, on the other hand, had 45 wins, 30 losses, 7 overtime losses, 97 points, with a 228 goals for, 239 goals against, so a minus 11 differential, 22 17 and 2 at home, 23 13 and 5 away, and obviously 5 3 and 2 in their last 10. So let's just jump right into this series. The Minnesota Wild obviously taking on your Vegas Golden Knights. And let's just talk a little bit about the Minnesota Wild. So they've had a very interesting season, right? If you look at the Minnesota Wild, obviously, 82 games played for Matt Boldy at a 73-point year, 27 goals for him. Marco Rossi with a great season as well, 60 points for him. Matt Zuccarello at 54 and 69. But the two big question marks in this season were obviously Kirill Kaprizov and Joel Eriksson Ek. Joel Eriksson Ek and Kirill Kaprizov missed significant time this season, which impacted the way the Minnesota Wild played under both those guys, right? Kaprizov, before he got injured, had 25 was 20 well Kaprizov in 41 games this year had 25 goals, 31 assists, 56 points. He was one of the best players in the league before getting injured, and he missed a lot of time due to injury. And then you also have Joel Eriksson Ek, who as well, same thing for him, 46 games played for him, 14 goals, 15 assists. He had 29 points as well this season. So Minnesota's Minnesota season impacted a lot on both those guys, right? Not being able to have them obviously affected their play, affected how they obviously did things, but they needed guys to step up. And Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi obviously did. Matt Zuccarello did as well. Freddie Gaudreau, Marcus Johansson were two guys that obviously stepped up big time. They went to go acquire Gustav Nyquist, who had 7 points in 22 games during his time. They obviously went to go add to their forward group with Justin Brazeau as well. But a lot of Minnesota's additions and how they kind of went into this was dependent on their defense and how well their defense was going to play. And I want to talk a little bit about Minnesota's defense a little bit and in net, because they weren't a team that scored very many goals, as you saw from the stats that I listed before. But they're a team that, found a way to be able to keep the puck out of the net a lot, right? Jared Spurgeon had a really good season under his circumstance. Obviously missed 66 games. Only played 66 games at 32 points during that time. He was a +8 in those minutes. Brock Faber, not the best offensive production for him. Did play 78 games, though. Only 29 points. So Brock Faber really didn't shine from an offensive perspective, but did average about 25 minutes of ice time while playing. Jacob Middleton had a really good season, 21 points in 67 games, but this guy isn't really known for his production offensively, although he did have a really good or a decent offensive output. Obviously, for him, he's known more for his block shots, his hits, and his takeaways and giveaways ratios. And then you have Jonas Brodin and Zach Bogosian as well. So Minnesota is a team that obviously needs all four lines to roll, right? If you look at their team on paper right now, they're a little bit more of a four-line team, right? Matt Boldy, Joel Eriksson Ek, and Kirill Kaprizov are your top line. You have Matt Zuccarello with Freddie Gaudreau and Marcus Johansson as your second line. You have Gus Nyquist, Marco Rossi, and Marcus Foligno as your third line. And then your fourth line is Ryan Hartman, Justin Brazeau, and Yakov Trenin. Then on defense, you have Jonas Brodin with Brock Faber, Jacob Middleton with Jared Spurgeon, and then Zach Bogosian's playing with Zeev Buium. Yep, Zeev Buium signed his ELC with Minnesota at the end of the season, is expected to make his playoffs debut, so a big addition for them. Really good defenseman from college, drafted, I believe. He was 11th overall by Minnesota last year, if I'm not mistaken. Really good player, just fantastic, and he's expected to also play on the PP1, which if you see right there on Daily Faceoff, alongside Zuccarello, Eriksson Ek, and Kirill Kaprizov. So he's going to add some much-needed offense to Minnesota's blue line. He's going to be a very good puck-moving defenseman that could help first of all, their power play, but also not only that, be able to help Minnesota score. Because that's one of their biggest criticisms, right? Is this team isn't able to really score some goals. But that's also because, like we mentioned mentioned before, no Kirill Kaprizov, no Joel Eriksson will do that to you. I think with the addition of both these guys, Minnesota could be a really interesting wild card in this situation because you look at Vegas and they don't always have the best success. It's been a really tough season for Vegas over the last couple of years, right? And one of the biggest things about Vegas is like they're good in the playoffs. They come in, but they haven't really shined since they won that Stanley Cup. They haven't really looked like a team that I think a lot of people expected from them. And so I think for that reason, it could be a really interesting situation for the Minnesota Wild. They can come in and they have a fully healthy Kirill Kaprizov, a fully healthy Joel Eriksson, and they can do some damage, right? With the addition of obviously Marco Rossi stepping up this year and being a really big difference maker, and Matt Boldy, this could really help their team in terms of their offense and really be that team that I think a lot of Wild fans expect them to be, and take the hump because Minnesota's had a lot of trouble getting out of the first or second round of the playoffs and not being able to go far and become that cup contender. I think they'll be able to do that, if they can get their offense going and if they can get their team sorted in terms of just being able to produce at the highest level. And I think obviously seeing what Matt Boldy and Marco Rossi have been able to do, and obviously seeing what Kirill Kaprizov was able to do before getting injured, there's a lot of optimism around Minnesota. And then you add the addition of obviously Zeev Buium to your blue line, that makes your team a lot better. The other question too is you look at the Minnesota Wild goaltending. Philip Gustafsson, 31, 19, and 6 this season, 5 shutouts and a 914 save percentage. He was spectacular this year. Really played some fantastic hockey when was called upon, was really good for Minnesota, kept them pretty much in it all season, and has been a difference maker for them in net, which I think is going to be huge for them going into this playoff, knowing that they have a goaltender in Philip Gustafsson who's been able to shut the door for them all season and really be a key aspect to the reason why they win hockey games, I think is huge for this team. Then you obviously have Marc-Andre Fleury, who played 26 games this year, 14-9-1. He had an 899 save percentage, 1 shutout. He's obviously at the end of his contract with Minnesota. He's also at the end of his career. Is expected to retire after this season. He was, decent. I think over the stretch of the season, I think he struggled at the end, but he was decent for them. Good backup for them. I think obviously has a lot of playoff experience. So if something happens to Gustafsson, he could definitely step in. And you have Jesper Wallstedt, who only played 2 games, 843, and not the best in his 2 starts. So Minnie's got a lot of interesting situations, right? And I think that this is something that is really going to make them underdogs in this series, right? They're definitely not expected to win. Obviously, they went until the last game of the season to pretty much qualify. Eriksson had to tie it late to push the game to overtime to be able to qualify. So it's a big situation, I think, for Minnesota. And the fact that they're in this position, I think, is huge for them. They get to play an opponent in Vegas that's a really tough opponent, but they do have a lot of pieces that are very interesting. So I guess we'll have to wait and see what Minnesota can do, but it's going to be fun. And I think with a healthy Kirill Kaprizov, they can push this series a little bit further than when people expect. Let's go to Vegas, and then I'll give my prediction as to where I think they're going to go. Vegas has had a really interesting season this year, and I'm going to explain to you why I believe that. I mean, first of all, you talk about their offense. They were the best offensive team this season in the West, besides obviously Vegas, besides the Jet Stars in Colorado, who all pretty much tied in that category for goals, except obviously Vegas was 4th. But if you talk about their offense, right, Jack Eichel led the way with 94 points, 28 goals, 66 assists. He was fantastic all season. Mark Stone, 66 games played, 67 points. He was great. Thomas Hertl scored 30 goals and had 61 points. Shea Theodore, before he got injured, had 57 points in 67 games. Really just good production from everybody. And then you have Pavel Dorofeyev, who really came out and bursted into the scene with 35 goals this year, playing big minutes with Eichel and Stone. Barbashev at 51 points and 23 goals. Brad Howden at 23 goals and 40 points. And then Noah Hannafin, obviously, with 39 and 80, and Pietrangelo with 33 and 71. So we talk about Vegas, and one of the things that I obviously look at, the first thing that I pay attention to is their depth. The amount of guys that are able to just produce for them is crazy. Brett Howden, 23 goals is a big amount for a guy who plays pretty much on Vegas's 3rd line, or in this case, he's listed as their 4th line, right? So he for the fact that he plays that many minutes, I think that's really huge for him to have 23 goals. Nicolas Roy, 15 goals. Keegan Carlside, 12 goals, right? Victor Olofsson and Tanner Pearson, 15 and 12 goals respectively. Like, that's very impressive. Noah Hannafin playing PP2 units and sometimes power play 1, 10 goals for him. You talk about Ivan Barbashev, 23. You talk about Thomas Hertl and Jack Eichel, right? And Pavel Dorofeyev, sorry, with 32 goals. Eichel with 28. Like these guys can score goals in bunches. They have so many guys that can just come in and be a difference maker. Mark Stone had 19 goals, 48 assists, right? So it's very, very interesting to be able to see that Vegas just has depth across their lineup, especially on offense with just their lines and everything that they obviously bring to the table. Like their top line is really good, really deep, really, productive, and they can score goals on all those three lines. And then you have a fourth line with Nikolai Waugh, Keegan Kolesar, and Brett Howden that can also score and be physical and put some teams into some trouble. I think Vegas is just a complete package in on offense. And then you look at their defense and like it just gets better, right? Nick Hague and Alex Pietrangelo is a really good pairing. You have Braden McNabb playing with Shea Theodore, and you have Noah Hannafin playing with Zach Whitecloud. You have really good defensemen on each pairing, right? Pietrangelo hasn't really played to the level that I think he would have liked to have played this season, but he's still a really good elite defenseman, that can play both ends of the ice and be really good in the offensive zone. And he's obviously a playoff performer, has won a Stanley Cup before, so he knows what it takes to win. And he's been a big part of Vegas' success for a long time. Then you have Brandon McNabb and Trey Theodore. It's just a really good shutdown pair, right? Theodore can score and be productive in the offensive zone. Brandon McNabb is a really good defensive defenseman, block shots, throws some hits, is a big body. So he's going to be really big for Vegas. And then obviously Zach Whitecloud and Noah Hannafin, again, an offensive production player in Noah Hannafin who can move the puck and be a difference maker on both ends of the ice. And Zach Whitecloud is a shutdown pair. And that's, I think, the perfect decor for the Vegas Golden Knights. You look at their power play, and it's just, both units are both really good units. And then in net, you have Aiden Hill and Ilya Samsonov. And if you look at Ilya Samsonov and obviously Aiden Hill's stats this year, Aiden Hill didn't have the most amazing season, 32, 13, and 5, so did get a lot of wins, 906 save percentage, 247 goals against average, so not bad for him, 4 shutouts. And then Ilya Samsonov, 69 and 4 in 29 games played, 2 shutouts for him, 891. So obviously in net right now, if you have to compare the two teams, Aiden Hill obviously didn't have a better season than Gustafsson from a personal stats wise. He did win more games, did have less losses, but 906 save percentage is not great because what that does is it's above the average, but in terms of obviously the production, I think you would have liked Aiden Hill to have a little bit of a better save percentage. And then Ilya Samsonov, 891 is just not the best for him. So I think in net, obviously you look at Minnesota and you think to yourself, like, this is obviously Minnesota's aspect. But I think from a defense and an offensive perspective, I think Vegas is just better than them. Obviously, if you look at the trade deadline acquisitions that Vegas made, they didn't really do much. The only acquisition they really made to their team that was pretty effective and actually played a big role for them was Riley Smith. 21 games played for Vegas in his time with them, 11 points for him. So he was solid. He was their trade deadline acquisition. They brought him back from the New York Rangers after a spell away from them. So huge on that regard. But I look at these two teams and I pay attention to obviously their statistics and just watching them play this season. And in my opinion, like, I look at Vegas and I've watched Vegas. I went to a Vegas game obviously this year. And one of the biggest things that I wanted to obviously add to that is, you look at just their team, you look at what they bring to the table. You look at the fact that they've obviously been able to be the best team in the league or one of the best teams in the league for a long time, right? Like that plays a role. And watching Vegas and watching the way they played over the last 10 games, 2-6-2-2, like this is a team that's going to give Minnesota a lot of trouble. And, as much as I like Minnie and as much as, Kirill Kaprizov, I think is a really good player. And I think he's going to make a huge difference. And when he's in the lineup versus when he's not in the lineup, you see the difference for Minnesota. I just don't know if they have enough after their second line. Like, I look at their lineup and like, look, Marco Rossi could probably slot in as your second line center. You can probably bring some guys down. But apart from that top line, they don't really have elite talent everywhere else, right? And I think that they're going to be heavily reliant on their power play. I think they're going to be heavily reliant on their special teams. I think they're going to be heavily reliant on the top line being obviously their best line and producing and scoring goals and doing all that stuff, right? Whereas you look at Vegas and like just from top to bottom, like they're just stacked, right? Like Jack Eichel, Mark Stone, Ivan Barbashev, and then like even Dorofeyev, who's had a really good year, Thomas Hertl. Like, these are two guys that both scored above 30 goals, right? So that second line we know can score, right? along with Brandon Saad, who's also a guy that can score. And then you have a third line in Carlson, Riley Smith, and Victor Olofsson. You've got a sniper and a playmaker and a two-way forward on that line. Like, these are guys this is 4 straight lines that can just score at you in bunches. And I think that that's going to be a problem for Minnesota. And even with the addition of Zeev Buium on the back end, I think it's going to help them because, Zeev Buium's a great player. He's had a really good NCAA career, right? Was a top pick for them. I think they're expecting him to come in and make an impact. I just don't know if Minnesota has enough. And I think this series is going to be really reliant on, their goaltending and how good is Philip Gustafsson going to be? Is Philip Gustafsson the type of goaltender that can steal a series? I think he's shown this season that he's capable. I think he's shown this season that at times this year he can be a difference maker for Minnesota and he can really carry them to victories and be solid and be one of the best goaltenders in the league, when called upon. But if you just look at their stats, their head-to-head results this season between Vegas and Minnesota, like one of the things that obviously takes into consideration is if you watch their head-to-heads, Vegas went 3-0 against Minnesota, right? Scored 12 goals, 4 goals against. So they play Minnesota really, really well, right? And they're very good at obviously playing Minnesota. It's a game that seems to work out for Vegas, pretty much all the time. And I look at obviously their games this season, and to me, I think it puts Minnesota at a really tough disadvantage because they can score. They average about 4 goals a game against them. They only let in about 1.3. So they know how to play Minnesota. They've played Minnesota before. They understand how to beat them. They've done it all season, right? And I know the regular season stats, and sometimes when you play regular season stats versus when you compare them to playoffs, it's 2 different beasts and it's 2 different situations. But Vegas has always played Minnesota very well, and I think that Vegas this year wants to prove that they're capable of winning another Stanley Cup, and I think they have the team to do it, right? Like, we talk about teams like Dallas, we talk about teams like Colorado, right? Edmonton's in that mix, in that conversation. I don't think people are giving Vegas a whole lot of credit and a whole lot of opportunities to win a Stanley Cup. At least the brackets that I see, a lot of people, and myself included, have Colorado in that mix. They have Dallas in that mix, right? They have Winnipeg in that mix. I don't think a lot of people are giving Vegas a whole lot of cup shouts this year, but they're a team that I think could really honestly win it all, right? With just how well they're built. Bruce Cassidy is a really good coach, and I just love their forward core. I think they have the best balance of forwards in the league, in my opinion, right? And I think for them, if everybody's going, and if Jack Eichel is obviously playing at the level that he's obviously been playing at all season, and if Dorofeyev can continue the production that he's given Vegas all season, and Hurdle as well can give that production, like, this team is unstoppable. And even with Shea Theodore and with Alex Pietrangelo, like, they have a whole lot of guys that can make a huge difference for them. And then, like, you look at Minnesota and look, their defense is really good. Their offense is not the best in terms of offensive production and offensive output, but they are a team that I think could upset guys. I don't think this is going to be a series where Minnesota's going to come in and get swept in 4. I don't see that. I think Minnesota could win 2 games. I think they can even push Vegas to 7. I just don't know if they have enough to be able to beat Vegas in a 7-game series. And for that reason, I have to go with the Vegas Golden Knights. And I like always the underdog stories. I think I'm a fan of those. I would love to see Minnesota go on a run and see what they can do. I just don't know if they have enough yet this year to be able to beat a team like Vegas in a 7-game series. And I just think that Vegas is more complete. I think even though Minnesota has the better goaltending overall wise, I don't really like what they're made of. And I think Gustafson's going to really have to bail them out. And I think Minnesota's defense has to really make the difference here if they want to win it. So I'm not sure, but I'm excited to see what Zeev Buium's going to do. I think he's going to be a really big help for Minnesota. I think even next year when he comes in, he's going to look really good. But obviously the season that Brock Faber had, being more of a defensive player rather than the offensive defenseman that he's capable of being, I think hurt their production this year. But he's still a really good defenseman. So I'm going to say Vegas in 6. And that's the prediction that I'm going to go with. But I do want to see what Minnesota can do and how well Minnesota can come in and beat them. And the last thing that I want to add, obviously, before we obviously wrap this up, like, you look at just some of the team stats that we've obviously established this season. Like, if you want to look at Vegas's power play percentage, obviously by game, and let's just change this to regular season a second. Like if you go to Vegas's power play percentage, they're second in the league in power play, right? The only team that is better than them on the power play this season was the Winnipeg Jets. You look at where the Minnesota Wild are, they're ranked 20th in the league on the power play. So, a little bit below average or a little bit below middle of the pack, right? Vegas is second. So their power play has been really good. Then you look at their penalty kill, right? And obviously Minnesota's penalty kill is 30th in the league. Vegas is 26th. So Vegas didn't have a really good PK this year. They kind of struggled on the PK, but Minnesota struggled even more on the PK. And you're coming up against the second best team in the league on the power play. Minnesota's PK is going to have to be at their best, and I just don't know if they're going to be. So the fact that Vegas's PK is at 26, I think could make a huge difference because it could help Minnesota in terms of being able to score power play goals and whatever. But with Minnesota's power play only being 20th, it does beg the question that like Z Bouillam's going to come in and obviously change that, but the series could be determined by penalty kills, right? And how well the teams can kill penalties and how well special teams can play a factor, right? And if Vegas can find a way to be able to score some goals on their power play and have their lethal power play be even more effective in the playoffs, like I just don't see how Minnesota can come back from that. And the other thing that I like to look at when I compare teams is shots per game versus shots against. You look at shots per game, Vegas takes 30.3 shots per game, whereas the Minnesota Wild only take 27.6. They're 23rd in the league in shots per game. And then shots against per game, this is the least amount of shots that they give up. Vegas is fourth in the league in shots against per game. Minnesota is 26th. So that's a big thing too, right? Vegas beats them in pretty much every important metric: shots forward, shots against, power play percentage, and PK percentage. And I think that that's why this series looks a lot more lopsided than I think people give them credit for. Is I just think Vegas has a lot. They've shown from their stats that they're capable of being even better. And Minnesota gives up 29.6 shots per game. Like that's a lot of shots to give up, and that's a lot of saves that your goaltender has to make. And so I think for that reason, it's just this series just looks like it's going to be a Vegas series and a Vegas win. But like I said, guys, I want to see what Minnesota's capable of doing. I want to see, how well Zeev Bouillam's going to do. I think Brock Faber can step it up a little bit more on the offensive output. And if Minnesota can get a couple of goals and have, some solid goaltending, I think they can win this series. But if not, I think Vegas is going to run away with this in maybe 5 or 6 games. So, guys, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Give me your thoughts. Give me your predictions. Let me know what you think about this series and if you think Vegas is going to win or Minnesota is going to win. And we'll catch you guys in the next episode of the Young Guns podcast. Peace.